Admiral Susan Blake stood frozen in the command center of Earth's main defense station. The large screen in front of her showed only static now. Moments ago, it had displayed the destruction of Outpost Horizon, humanity's farthest space colony. "Run it again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The young officer beside her, Commander Alan Wright, tapped a few buttons. The recording started once more. The peaceful image of Outpost Horizon appeared, a beautiful mix of domes and towers built on an asteroid. Over 800 people had lived there. Families, children. Then 3 large ships appeared from nowhere. Their dark, scaled hulls were unmistakable. Vresian warships. Without warning, they opened fire. The recording showed bright energy beams cutting through the colony's thin shields. Buildings exploded. The air was sucked into space. In just 2 minutes, everything was gone. Susan's hands gripped the edge of the control panel until her knuckles turned white. "No warning," Alan said. "No demands. They just attacked." 3,000 years, Susan said. "We've had peace with the Vresians for 3,000 years. Why would they break it now?" The door to the command center slid open. General Peter Collins walked in, his face grim. "It's not just Horizon," he said. "We've lost contact with 6 other outposts along the border. Earth Central Command has confirmed attacks on all of them." Susan turned away from the screen. "Have we tried contacting the Vresian Council?" "All channels are silent," Peter replied. "Their ambassadors on Earth disappeared from their embassy last night. No explanation." Commander Allen looked at both senior officers. He was young, only 30. He had never seen war. Nobody alive had. "What do we do?" he asked. Susan walked to the large star map that covered one wall. She touched a point of light marking Outpost Horizon, now gone. "We defend what's left," she said. "And we find out why this is happening." An alarm sounded through the station. Red lights flashed. "Report," Susan shouted. "Vresian ships detected entering the Sol system." A technician called out. 15. No, 20 warships approaching Mars colony. On Earth, in the underground bunker of Central Command, President Heather Powell faced the grim faces of her advisors. The emergency meeting had been called just 30 minutes ago when the first reports came in. "How is this possible?" she asked. "The peace treaty has held for longer than recorded human history." Defense Secretary Jack Morris handed her a tablet showing the destruction of the outposts. "We don't know why, Madam President, but we need to act now. Mars colony has 5 million civilians and only basic defenses." Heather closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were clear and focused. "Activate all defense systems. Call back every ship we have. And send out the emergency code to all our worlds." "The war code hasn't been used in," Jack began. "I know exactly how long it's been," Heather cut him off. "Do it anyway." Across the solar system, old defense platforms began to power up. Ships that had been used for science and exploration for centuries received new orders. And on colonies throughout human space, people looked up at the skies with fear for the first time in generations. On the UES Guardian, the largest human ship still in service, Susan Blake watched as her crew rushed to battle stations. Most had never trained for actual combat. The weapons systems were ancient, maintained only out of tradition. "Will they work?" Ellen asked, watching engineers hurry to check missile bays that hadn't been opened in centuries. "They'll have to," Susan replied. She looked at the young faces around her, men and women who had never imagined they would fight in a war. "We have 6 hours before those ships reach Mars. Make them count." As the Guardian prepared to defend humanity, no one yet understood the true reason behind the attacks. No one knew that the peaceful 3,000 years had been merely a pause in a much older conflict, and no one realized that the Vresians were not acting of their own free will. The war had begun again, and humanity would have to remember how to fight. Deep beneath old Chicago, in the vast underground archives, Dr. Gregory Martinez worked without stopping. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he moved from one ancient data terminal to another. The room was filled with the soft hum of old machines and the smell of dust. "There has to be something here," he said to himself. "Nobody breaks a 3,000-year piece for no reason." His research assistant, Olivia Pearson, entered the dimly lit room carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Any luck?" she asked, handing Gregory one of the cups. He shook his head. "Not yet, but these old records might hold the key." The archives were a forgotten place. Few people ever came here. Why would they? The time before the Great Peace was ancient history, studied only by scholars like Gregory. The weapons, battle plans, and war stories had been sealed away as humanity embraced its peaceful future with the Freshens. "Look at this," Gregory said, pointing to a display case. Inside was a medal, its metal dull with age. This was given to soldiers who fought in the last war with the Freshens, before the peace treaty. Olivia leaned closer to read the small sign. "That was over 3,000 years ago. Do you really think something from that far back could explain what's happening now?" "I do." Gregory nodded firmly. "History doesn't just disappear, it waits." He moved to an old machine in the corner of the room. It was covered with a sheet of plastic to protect it from dust. "This is a data crystal reader," he explained. "The oldest one we have. Some of the first records of our contact with the Freshens are stored on these." He carefully placed a small blue crystal into the machine. It hummed louder as it tried to read the ancient storage device. "Will it work?" Olivia asked. "It has to," Gregory replied. The air above the machine flickered, and then a holographic image appeared. The picture was not clear, but they could see human soldiers fighting strange machines. The humans wore old-style spacesuits. The machines looked like early Vresian war robots. "This is from the First War," Gregory said, "around 5,200 years ago." But as they watched, something strange appeared in the recording. Behind the Vresian forces, shadowy figures moved. They were neither human nor Vresian. "Wait," Olivia said, pointing. "Who are they?" Gregory's face went pale. "The Ketvan," he whispered. "I thought they were just stories." He quickly moved to another terminal and typed in the strange name. Bold files appeared on the screen. The Ketvan were mentioned in some of the oldest records, he explained as he read. They were thought to be myths or excuses made up to explain the war. Nobody believed they were real. "What were they supposed to be?" Olivia asked. "A third species," Gregory said. "One that supposedly worked from the shadows, pushing humans and Freshens to fight each other." He turned to another screen, showing biological data about Freshens. "Look here," he pointed to strange patterns in the Fresian genetic code. These anomalies were never explained. What if they're not natural? What if they were put there? "By these Ketvan?" Olivia asked, her voice showing her doubt. Gregory nodded slowly. "What if the Vresians aren't attacking us by choice? What if they're being controlled?" Just then, an alarm sounded. The secure communication terminal in the corner of the room lit up. Gregory rushed to answer it. "Dr. Martinez," said the stern voice of Admiral Blake. "We've captured a Fresian commander. You need to come to Luna Base right away. Bring everything you found." Gregory looked at Olivia, his eyes wide. "We're looking at the wrong enemy," he said. "Someone is pulling the Vresians' strings, just like they did before." As they rushed to gather their research, Gregory felt a chill run down his spine. If he was right, humanity wasn't just facing an old enemy. They were facing something much worse, a hidden force that had been planning this moment for thousands of years. "We thought we knew our history," he told Olivia as they hurried out of the archives. "But there's a whole chapter nobody remembered. Until now." Captain Ryan Foster sat in the command chair of the UES Valiant, feeling its old metal creak beneath him. The ship had been in a museum for over 100 years before being called back to service. Now it was humanity's best hope. "Status report," Ryan called out, his voice steady despite the fear in his stomach. "All systems ready, Captain," replied Lieutenant Kimberly Jones from the tactical station. Her hand shook slightly as she worked the controls. 5 Russian cruisers on approach to Proxima Colony. ETA 12 minutes. Ryan looked around the bridge. His crew was a strange mix. Some were old veterans pulled from retirement, men and women who had served on these ships when they were just for show. Others were young recruits who had signed up for space service, expecting peaceful exploration. None had expected to fight a war. "Listen up," Ryan said, standing from his chair. "I know most of you never trained for combat. I know these ships haven't fired weapons in anger for thousands of years. But our ancestors faced these same enemies and won." He walked to the main view screen, which showed the approaching Vresian ships. Their dark hulls reflected no light, making them look like holes in space. "We've studied the old battle records," Ryan continued. "We know their weak points. We know how to fight them. And we have something they don't expect." "What's that, sir?" asked a young officer at the navigation console. Ryan smiled. "Surprise. They think we've forgotten how to fight." The plan was simple but dangerous. From the archives, they had learned that Vresian ships had blind spots in their sensor arrays. If human ships could get close enough without being detected, they could strike hard before the Vresians knew what was happening. "All ships, power down to minimal systems," Ryan ordered over the fleet comm. "Drift on current course. No engine signatures. No active scanning." The lights on the bridge dimmed as the Valiant went into low-power mode. 5 human ships, all recently recommissioned from museums and training facilities, drifted silently toward the Vresian fleet. "They're not changing course," Kimberly reported. "They don't see us." The bridge was silent except for the soft beeping of instruments. Ryan felt sweat running down his back. If he was wrong, if the old tactics didn't work, Proxima Colony and its 2 million people would be defenseless. "Distance to target?" Ryan asked. 30 seconds to optimal firing range," Kimberly answered. Ryan took a deep breath. "On my mark, all ships power up weapons systems and target the lead Vresian cruiser. Fire everything we have." The seconds ticked by slowly. Ryan watched the enemy ships grow larger on the view screen. "Now," he ordered. The Valiant came to life. Lights blazed, engines roared, and weapon systems charged. The other human ships did the same, all at once. Before the Vresian ships could react, the human fleet opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space. The lead Vresian cruiser took the full force of the attack. Its shields flashed and failed. Explosions rippled across its hull. "Direct hit," Kimberly shouted. "Enemy ship is breaking apart." The remaining Vresian ships tried to turn and fight, but they were caught off guard. The human ships moved in fast, firing from the blind spots in the Vresian sensors. "Keep pressing the attack," Ryan ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The battle was short but fierce. When it ended, 3 Vresian cruisers were destroyed. 1 was badly damaged and drifting. The 5th had turned and fled. Ryan sank back into his command chair, hardly believing what had just happened. They had won. Humanity's first battle in 3,000 years, and they had won. "Casualties?" he asked. "Minimal, sir," Kimberly reported. 2 injured on the Defiant. No deaths. A message alert sounded on Ryan's console. It was from Admiral Blake, marked urgent and encrypted. "Captain Foster," her image said when he opened the message. "Congratulations on your victory. But there's something you need to see. We've captured a Vresian commander alive during the defense of Mars. What he's told us changes everything. Report to Luna Base immediately." The video showed a Vresian prisoner, its scaled skin pale in the bright lights. It looked sick, almost afraid. "We are not in control of our actions," the Vresian said in halting English. "The masters have returned. The old programming has been activated." Ryan felt a chill run through him. Programming. Masters. What does this mean? He asked aloud, though no one on the bridge could answer. The victory suddenly felt hollow. If the Vretians were not acting of their own free will, who was really behind this war? The meeting room on Luna Base was packed with the most important people in human space. President Heather Powell sat at the head of the large round table. Military leaders, scientists, and government officials filled every seat. Tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Dr. Gregory Martinez stood at the center of the room. Behind him, a large screen showed images from the ancient archives and data from the recent battles. "Thank you all for coming," Gregory began. He looked tired but determined. "What I'm about to tell you will change how we see this war." He tapped a control, and an image of the captured Vretian appeared on the screen. "This Vretian commander has confirmed what I found in the archives. The Vretians aren't attacking us by choice. They're being controlled." Whispers filled the room. Admiral Susan Blake, who had just arrived from the front lines, leaned forward. "Controlled by whom?" she asked. Gregory changed the image to show the shadowy figures from the ancient recording. "By these beings, the Ketvan, a species that tried to conquer both humanity and the Vretians over 3,200 years ago." President Powell frowned. "I've never heard of them." "Few people have," Gregory explained. "They were mostly erased from our history when the peace treaty was signed, but they were very real." He showed more images, strange alien ships, biological data, battle reports from the distant past. When the Ketvan couldn't defeat us directly, they tried another approach. They inserted genetic triggers into the Vretian population, a kind of biological programming that could be activated generations later. "Like sleeper agents," said General Ellis from the back of the room. "Exactly," Gregory nodded. "Only instead of a few individuals, it's almost their entire military caste. Once activated, they have no choice but to follow the programming." President Powell stood up. Her face was pale, but her voice was strong. "So you're saying the Vretians aren't our real enemies? They're victims too?" "Yes, Madam President. They're being used as weapons against us." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Then Lieutenant Commander Eric Bailey, head of Deep Space Intelligence, stepped forward. He was young and looked nervous to speak in front of such important people. "There's more," he said. "We've detected unusual energy signatures from the Cygnus Void." He tapped his own control, and the screen changed to show a star map. A dark region of space was highlighted. The Cygnus Void has always been avoided by both humans and Vretians. Our oldest stories say it's cursed. Vretian legends say the same. "Not cursed," Gregory interrupted. "Forbidden. Both our species were warned to stay away. By the peace treaty." Eric nodded. "Something is emerging from that region now. Something big." He zoomed in on the map, showing energy readings and movement patterns. "We think." He hesitated, then continued. "We think it's a fleet, larger than anything we've ever seen." Admiral Blake stood up. "The Ketvan have been hiding there for over 3,000 years. "It appears so," Eric confirmed. "They've been waiting, letting both our species grow, expand, develop new technologies, only to use the Vretians to destroy us." President Powell finished the thought. Gregory moved to the center of the room again. "This wasn't a random attack. This was planned for millennia. The Ketvan want both our species weakened before they emerge. They're making us fight each other so they don't have to." President Powell looked around the room, her eyes meeting those of each person present. "Then we need to stop fighting the Vretians and start helping them," she said. "Can we reverse this genetic programming?" "Our scientists are already working on it," Gregory replied. "But we'll need to work with unaffected Vretian civilians. And we don't have much time." Admiral Blake's comm device beeped. She looked at it, then up at the others, her face grim. "The Vretian fleet has just launched an all-out attack on the Alpha Centauri colonies," she reported, "and we're picking up more unknown ships entering the edge of our space. The Ketvan are coming out of hiding," Gregory said quietly. "The real war is about to begin." The lab on Mars Station hummed with activity. Dr. Natalie Rivera hadn't slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. But she didn't care about sleep now. Not when millions of lives depended on her work. "Try it again," she told her team. Increase the viral load by 15%. The lab was filled with the best scientists from Earth and the few Vresian civilians who had escaped the genetic programming. They worked side by side, former enemies now united against a common threat. Natalie looked through a microscope at a sample of Vresian cells. On the screen beside her, the genetic code scrolled past. The Ketvon trigger sequence glowed red among the normal Vresian DNA. "It's elegant," she said, almost with admiration. Whoever designed this was thinking in terms of millennia, not years. A Vresian scientist named Kraz moved next to her. His scales were a soft green color, different from the military caste's dark blue. 4 eyes blinked at the screen. "We always knew something was wrong with our genetics," Kraz said in his soft, clicking voice. "Our scientists found gaps, strange sequences we couldn't explain. Now we know why." Natalie nodded. "The Ketvon hid triggers in your DNA that could be activated after thousands of years. When activated, they bypass conscious control and trigger aggressive responses, making our military case attack humans without questioning why." Kraz finished. "The good news," Natalie said, looking up from her work, "is that we might be able to reverse it." Across the lab, a young human scientist called out, "Test batch 37 is showing positive results." Natalie rushed over. On a screen, they could see Vresian cells changing, the red trigger sequences fading. "The viral vector is working," Natalie said, hope in her voice for the first time in days. "It's rewriting the affected sequences." She turned to the whole team. "We need to scale this up. Fast." Hours later, Natalie stood in the communication room, explaining their progress to the holographic images of military and political leaders. "The cure works in the lab," she said. "We've developed a viral vector that can rewrite the Ketvon trigger sequences in Vresian DNA. It returns control to the conscious mind." "How do we deliver it?" asked Admiral Blake. Her image flickered slightly. "That's the hard part," Natalie admitted. "It needs to be released into the air processing systems of Vresian military worlds and ships. It has to be breathed in to work quickly." "That means going behind enemy lines," said Major Daniel Scott, the special operations officer assigned to the project. His face was serious. "Into the heart of forces trying to kill us." "Not enemies," Natalie corrected gently. "Victims." Daniel nodded, accepting the correction. "Either way, it won't be easy." President Powell's hologram spoke up. "How many Vresian civilians are unaffected?" "About 20% of their population," Kraz answered. "Mostly scientists, artists, children. The Ketvon programming targets the military caste specifically." "Then we'll work with the unaffected civilians," Powell decided. "Form a joint task force." Daniel looked skeptical. "Will they help us? Their own people are attacking us." "They will help," Kraz said firmly. "Those of us who are free know the truth. This is not a war between Vresians and humans. It is a war against the Ketvon." Natalie looked at the vials of the cure, glowing softly blue under the lab lights. "The delivery system is ready," she said. "We've created atmospheric dispersal pods that can spread the cure quickly through air systems." "How fast will it work?" Daniel asked. "Minutes for the first symptoms to show. Hours for full recovery," Natalie explained. "But the Vresians will know something is wrong immediately. They'll feel the programming weakening." Admiral Blake's hologram looked at Major Scott. "Assemble your team, Major. This mission is now top priority." As the meeting ended, Natalie returned to her microscope. The weight of billions of lives rested on her work. "Will it be enough?" Kraz asked quietly beside her. "It has to be," Natalie replied. "Otherwise, both our species will just be pawns in someone else's game." Outside the lab window, the red surface of Mars stretched to the horizon. Somewhere beyond the stars, the ancient enemy was coming. They had very little time left. General Kevin Murphy stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, looking at the strange fleet gathered around his ship. Half of the vessels were human, hurriedly repaired and armed for battle. The other half were Vresian civilian ships, their sleek shapes so different from human designs. Every ship had been painted with bright symbols, ancient Vresian markings that stood for freedom and resistance. These same symbols had been used thousands of years ago, when the Vresians first fought against the Ketvon. "It's time," Kevin said to the officers around him. His face was tired but determined. "Open the channel to all ships." A young communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Kevin took a deep breath and looked at the camera that would send his image to every ship in the fleet. "This is General Murphy. In a few minutes, we will enter Vresian space. Our mission is not to fight, but to save. For 3,000 years, our peoples lived in peace. That peace was not broken by choice, but by an ancient enemy who is hidden in the shadows, waiting to use us against each other." He paused, looking at the Vresian civilian leader standing beside him. She nodded encouragingly, her scales shifting to a determined blue color. "Today, we bring the cure. We free our Vresian allies from the control of the Ketvon. Each ship knows its target. Each team knows its mission. We go in fast, deploy the cure, and get out. Remember, the Vresian military forces are not our enemies. They are the first victims in this war." The fleet moved toward the main Vresian military base at Kurvak. On the tactical display, Kevin could see hundreds of enemy ships waiting for them. The base itself was massive, a space station the size of a small moon, surrounded by defense platforms. "They've detected us," reported Commander Sam Wilson from the sensor station. "Vresian warships moving to intercept." "Begin Phase 1, Kevin ordered. Half of the human ships broke formation, racing ahead of the main fleet. Their job was to draw fire, to create a distraction while the ships carrying the cure moved into position. Through the view screen, Kevin watched as bright flashes lit up space. The battle had begun. "Phase 2, he said calmly. The remaining ships, including the Defender, accelerated toward the Vresian base. Special shuttles broke away from each ship, each carrying dispersal pods filled with Dr. Rivera's cure. "Enemy fighters incoming," Sam shouted. The ship shook as something hit their shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Stay on course," Kevin ordered. "All ships, protect the shuttles." A Vresian civilian ship moved between the Defender and an incoming attack, taking the hit meant for them. Kevin watched as it spun away, damaged but still flying. On the ground inside the Vresian base, human and unaffected Vresian civilians fought side by side. They weren't trying to destroy, but to reach the atmospheric control centers. Each team carried precious pods of the cure. "First team has reached their target," Sam reported, relief in his voice. "They're deploying the cure now." One by one, reports came in from other teams. Despite heavy resistance, they were succeeding. The cure was being released into the air systems of Vresian worlds and bases. On the command ship, Kevin watched the tactical display as something strange began to happen. Vresian warships stopped firing. Some drifted in space, seemingly without direction. Others turned and began firing on ships that were still attacking. "It's working," said the Vresian civilian leader, her scales now a bright, hopeful blue. "My people are waking up. I can hear the confusion in their communications." Kevin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had gambled everything on this mission, and it was working. "Send the signal to all human forces," he ordered. "Cease fire on any Vresian ship that stops attacking." As more and more Vresian ships fell silent or changed sides, Kevin looked out at the stars beyond the battlefield. "Now," he said quietly, "we take the fight to the real enemy." The freed Vresian commander of a nearby warship opened a channel to the Defender. "We remember now," the Vresian said, his voice filled with anger and determination. "We remember what the Ketvon did to us, and we will make them pay." The alliance that had lasted 3,000 years was reborn, not through diplomacy this time, but through battle, sacrifice, and a shared enemy. The combined human-Vresian fleet gathered at the edge of the Cygnus Void. Over 1,000 ships hung in space, their lights tiny against the darkness ahead. This area of space had been avoided by both species for thousands of years. Old stories called it cursed. Now they knew why. On the bridge of the UES Guardian, now the flagship of the combined fleet, Admiral Susan Blake looked at the strange readings on the main screen. "What are we seeing?" she asked. "Something big," replied the sensor officer. "Like nothing we've ever encountered before." Susan turned to face the commanders of both species gathered on the bridge. Human officers in their blue uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with Vresian leaders, their scales now free of the dull color of control. "For 3,000 years, we built a peace we thought was our choice," she said. "Now we know it was just a pause in a war that began before many of our civilizations existed." She pointed to the dark void ahead of them. "The Ketphon have played a long game. They waited until we were advanced enough to be useful, but not united enough to resist. They almost succeeded in making us destroy each other." The Vresian High Commander Tark stepped forward. His scales shimmered with anger and determination. "But they failed," he said, his voice deep and strong. "They underestimated one thing, that our alliance was not merely political but built on true respect and friendship." The ship's alarms suddenly blared. The void ahead seemed to split open, revealing strange shapes moving toward them. "They're coming through," the sensor officer called out. On the view screen, the first Ketphon ships appeared. They were unlike anything in either species' records. Their hulls seemed partly alive, moving and shifting like skin. They didn't look built. They looked grown. "How many?" Susan asked quietly. "Hundreds," came the reply. "No, thousands. The readings keep changing as more come through." The Ketphon fleet was far larger than intelligence had estimated. The combined human-Vresian force was outnumbered at least 5-1. Susan felt a moment of doubt. How could they possibly win against such odds? But then she looked at the determination on the faces around her, human and Vresian alike. "Send the signal to all ships," she ordered. "Begin the attack plan." The battle that followed was like nothing in recorded history. Human ships, built for speed, darted between the massive Ketphon vessels, firing at weak points identified by the Vresians. Vresian warships, strong and heavily armed, took the brunt of the enemy fire, their newly upgraded shields holding against weapons designed to tear them apart. The Ketphon fought with strange weapons, beams that seemed to bend space itself, missiles that split into thousands of smaller projectiles, and strange energy fields that could disable ships without destroying them. "They want to capture, not kill," Tark observed as they watched another human ship get caught in an energy net. "They want our technology, our resources, and our people," Susan added grimly, "as slaves or worse." As the battle raged on, the first reports of success came in. A Ketphon command ship had been destroyed by a joint human-Vresian attack group. Then another. The strange ships were powerful, but not invincible. Susan looked at the battle map. They were still heavily outnumbered, but they were fighting smart, using their knowledge of each other's strengths and the element of surprise. "We can't win this battle today," she told the commanders, "but we can show them we won't be easy prey." Tark nodded in agreement. "We hit them hard, then retreat to regroup. This is just the first battle in a long war." As Susan gave the order to begin the withdrawal, she watched human and Vresian ships covering each other's retreat. The peace that had lasted 3,000 years had not made them weak, as the Ketphon had planned. Instead, it had given them something worth fighting for, each other. "The true war has just begun," she said, as the Guardian turned away from the battlefield. "And this time, we'll face it together."